got their money back. So that is what we should do with this authority. Finally, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, on Mukami. No, the other one, she actually agreed with me on the recruitment of staff.
Yeah, the other one is about the graduates who are trained.
Yes.
And they were fired. Yeah, in KRA.
Yeah.
And regarding the system, because you know what is happening. You can imagine the KRA officers are going loud, correcting taxes from hairdressers, mama boga, and yet there were systems. So that is why I was asking whether you reinstate those people because the government had taken them for training.
Yeah, I actually said that there was a system in place of training graduates, and I think it was a very good system. Honorable Mukami agreed. As to reinstating those who probably should have remained on the payroll, that I cannot give a promise until I understand.
Let's take the last one from Amisi.
That was it.
Yeah. Caleb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
One question.
Yeah, for being last, give me two, kindly. Thank you, Speaker. I know also I get an opportunity to listen to the entire interview when you are last, and you seem to be a person ready to disturb the stubborn status quo at the Treasury. But, you know, the former president of US, I think is Harry Truman, once said that he actually had a plate like this one at his desk and written there, the buck stops here. So you might consider having such a plate on your desk and you write that the buck stops here. Because, Mr. Speaker, the reason why you are in this job is actually from the reject the finance bill. So you are going to be at the center of budgeting and the financing for that budget. One of the ways of raising, you say the revenue from the loans, borrow either domestically, externally, or grants. There is the aspect of domestic borrowing from the diaspora. I've studied 3 countries, Pakistan, Nicaragua, and the Philippines, and even India. They have one of the highest diaspora remittance. And in fact, for Philippines, almost 35% of their GDP is from diaspora remittance.
26%.
26.
Yes.
Some countries are as high as 30. I've studied them. In fact, I'll give you a repeat. Maximize. That's something that I want you to really explain to me. And the last one, Speaker. 100 delegates met in Mount Washington, in Britain, New Hampshire. And they developed an international system. Bank of Reconstruction and Development came in. The IMF came in. The purpose was for reconstruction for the World Bank. On this other hand, the IMF, the purpose was to stabilize currencies of various countries, stabilization, and to balance of payment. But this system has saturated our domestic policies. They have saturated our physical and monetary policies. So much so that a minister sitting at Treasury has World Bank in his head. He knows that in absence of this, I rush to World Bank. It's no longer a port of last call. It's now a port of first call. How do we dislink our development path from the continuous dependence on the Britain with institutions that were there to reconstruct Europe and Japan after the World War II.
Nominee, answer those quickly. We are running out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
May I proceed? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Kaleba Mitsi, the MP for Saboti, has actually noticed that I'm going to, and very ready to disturb the status, the stubborn status quo at the Treasury. You could not be more right. Mr. Speaker, I am sure that His Excellency the President did not appoint me just to continue the business as usual at the Treasury, because then there would be no need to make changes. He would have just continued with the person who was, and even look at ways of reducing transaction costs for diaspora remittances, because that's one of the reasons that you hear them complain a lot about. On IMF, by the way, I want to be very clear on IMF. IMF will never invite themselves to our country. We do invite them and agree with them of challenges occasioned largely by COVID-19 and the drought in the region, and also the global disturbance of the supply chain and all that. We then went back to IMF in 2020, 2021. But I have looked at towards a budget deficit in the region of 2.5 to 3 achievable. I believe it will be done.
Thank you, nominee. A quick run in a few league. Some you have already spoken to. Are you aware that interest rates on loans are all-time high? What will you do to save Kenyans from exploitation by banks? Does MBADI believe in single portal for tax revenue collection? How do you plan to position internal audit department to deal with zero-fault audit? Confirm or deny allegations of corruption when you are there or now? They're not saying. What are you going to do on unpaid refund from KRA for insurance agents? How will you expand tax base on how will you reduce tax evasion and increase compliance? Prioritize payment to UHC and JSS staff. Will you do that when you get in? How will you deal with late capitation to schools? Whether you will make public contracts like SGR with public with Kenyans, because Kenyans have been asking for that, just as you have said that you will make public debt public. Housing levy, will you tell Kenyans where this fund is domiciled? Is it in consolidated fund or is it in treasury bonds? Those are from the public. There is also how will you promote the informal sector in Kenya? For instance, would you propose that all government offices procure locally manufactured furniture? Do you think that certain parts of the 2010 Constitution have contributed to a high public wage bill compared to GDP due to an excessively large administration. For instance, there are over 450 MPs, 1,500 MCS, 47 county governments. If this is the case, what are your thoughts? Would you recommend that the president proposes a referendum to reduce the constitutional overload of the administration? Those are members of the public listening into this conversation. If you can deal quickly with those, I have only one question for you.
Chairman, there is another one regarding money laundering. What are you going to do about it?
So you can run through all those. Some you have already talked about. You can.
Yeah. Actually, even the question by Honorable Mukame, I think I talked about that.
You did.
We are even hosting a regional body. Kenya is trying to comply.
Yes.
By the way, I would have to. Mr. Speaker, I'll just pick on a few. Interest rate, I think we talked about.
Of the public watching these proceedings, and I think that's very good.
Interest rate is high. It's now at 13.3%. It has moved up. But part of the reason why monetary policy, CBK came up with this monetary policy was to reduce inflation. You know, it was at a point when inflation was very high. Our inflation had reached 9.6, 9.7% in 2022 October. So it had to come down. We had to cool the economy.
Yes, Junet?
The Speaker, nominee, interest rate is not at 13%. 13% is the CBK monetary policy rate. But the interest rates now, banks are charging us 20%, 21%.
20 plus.
20 plus, not 13, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Junet, for helping. By the way, you know when accountants...
You know Junet is a trader, so he knows.
Yeah. When accountants talk about interest rate, we only talk about the the CBK rates, the interbank lending rates and all that. So the rates, the base lending rates, is at 13.3%. Let me make it clear. And that gives rise to even 20% charged by banks based on risk assessment. So this was done to cool the economy, but I think when I made my initial contributions, I said it has reached a point where we have to now balance between controlling inflation and making money available to the private sector. Mr. Speaker, you remember there was a time banks were chasing us all over the place to take money using pay slips. It's not there anymore. Why? Because government has become the single most important customer to banks. So it's between chicken and egg. Which one comes first? Do we cut on our expenditure? Do we reduce money that we borrow domestically first, or do we reduce the rates first? So those are the issues that we need balance. So I'll have a meeting with the Central Bank and Kenya Bankers Association to address this matter. If I am confirmed. Yes. Mr. Speaker, on internal audits, I can't agree more. Again, we must use our internal audit to improve efficiency in financial management. And internal audit is resident at the Treasury. This issue of corruption at the UN, I saw it on some email that was sent to me. And the allegation was that I used...
The same person.
I suspect that while working at the University of Nairobi, that I used the university funds to campaign. Probably the person who sent that message is not alive to the fact that I left university and went elsewhere, worked for 3.5 years before I became a member of parliament.
You said so.
Yeah. So I left university in 2004, and actually I resigned and got my pension back. It was 218,000. If I stole the money, they would have not paid me my pension. I think that's, to me, someone who probably is wondering how I made it to Parliament. And I didn't have, like, I didn't have money.
Competitors, just go on.
Yeah, but I want to tell him that I was, or her, that I was the least endowed in 207. Actually, they used to make a joke that I was campaigning with a bicycle and made it to Parliament because of trust that the people had in me. Late capitation to schools, this is all about availability of revenue. We must make money available and pay capitation, pay pension, pay CDF. Remember, we have rolled over 13 billion from last year's NGCDF. I personally, Mr. Speaker, am a proponent of National Government Constituency Development Fund. I support it fully because this is money that has revolutionized education in rural areas. You go to my constituency, the constituency I've represented for 15 years. Before CDF, we didn't even have primary schools. They were there by name, but there were no classrooms. Right now, you can see what it has done, and many others. Contracting, breaking public the contracts, that I started by saying we must be transparent and communicate what we do as a country. Housing levy, I don't want to really talk a lot about this housing levy because I still need to understand how it is operationalized, where the money is resident, and all the challenges around it we must deal with, because it is my duty, if I'm confirmed, it is my duty to make sure that this money is properly accounted for. Promoting informal sector, I think I talked about that. Yes, in terms of wage bill, contributed by the Constitution, that is true. Mr. Speaker, this Constitution is too expensive. I know the counties had been given, but Mr. Speaker, truth be told, we should have had these counties as agents of devolution for development, but not government. We should have had bigger governments. Where you have now, you go to Vihiga, Mr. Speaker, it's a county with governor, deputy governor, you have CCs, 10 of them, you have county assembly, you go to Busia,
chief officers,
it's the same, chief officer, all that. You go to
sub-county administrators,
yeah,
and ward administrators, village administrators,
you name it.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, there is even a clamor, very outrageous, for more counties. My super community want a county. I'm even asking, is it viable?
Mary wants a county.
Mary is calling for the Teso County. Let us face it. If we could have a system where we have regional governments, and then now devolve resources you can devolve as much as you want. Look, we have devolved CDF with a fund manager there with a very few skeleton stuff, and it is working. We could do the same with the devolving resources. That is what Kenyans wanted. But this big government with big cars, with flags all over the place, I think we overstretched ourselves. But that is upon Kenyans to decide. It is not John MBADI, either as a cabinet secretary or even a member of parliament, to decide for Kenyans. Kenyans will make that decision.
Thank you, John. I'll ask you two questions. One, we were told by one of your colleague nominees that in the road sector alone, we have pending bills of 166 billion.
Yes.
Out of which 90 is actual, 92 is actual debt or bills, and the rest is interest and penalties. Yeah. Now, in the event you get this position you are looking for, would you take time to negotiate with the people you owed the money to compromise on interest and penalties so that you reduce the weight on the exchequer? Number two, the PFM Act is very clear, and we passed it in this parliament, that no procuring agent can procure goods and services unless there's an attendant budget and funds. How are you going to ensure that this is enforced so that we don't run into these problems of pending bills? Because if you have an attendant budget, you procure goods and services, on delivery or completion, you pay. What are you going to do?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree that we will have to negotiate the interests and penalties that have been charged on various contracts. I am aware of that bill by the ministry, that is actually State Department for Roads. If you go to our records in Parliament, Public Accounts Committee had requested the Ministry of Roads to provide information on pending bills, analyzed, categorized in terms of principal sum, interest, and penalties. And we have that information in Parliament. I'm sure my colleagues will submit a report to the effect. We actually were recommending that the government negotiates with these contractors on the interest and penalties. But that you can only do if you show willingness and you show intention to pay. So I will work with the Cabinet Secretary for Roads and Infrastructure to make sure that we clearly demonstrate an intention to settle these bills. Road construction has stalled across the country as a result of this. And I will tell you, my constituency, where I come from, is one of them, as a one project which has just stalled because of this. So we need to do this across the country so that the road construction resumes. Because we have already invested money in these roads. We can't continue keeping them. But we have constraints. Look at the budget of roads. In fact, I was saying that that budget, at the rate of 50 billion, the pending bills alone, you may require not less than 3-4 years. But then if you have to finance all committed,
Churchill told us committed road projects.
That's actually where I was heading.
Are 1 trillion.
Yes. If you have to commit to for all commitments, you need 20 years. Committed roads, that is roads that have been started, their value, if you sum all of them across the country. So it's terrible. There are some initiatives which I think we should promote, where we get some of this road infrastructure done through PPPs. But there is also an initiative to negotiate, if the terms would be favorable, with some of the contractors that are coming from specific countries to take up this if it is within our budget ceiling, loan ceiling or debt ceiling, to take them up. Like the Chinese government has so many contractors around here who are doing roads using GOK funds. Currently, there are very few road projects done by loans from China. They are all working on roads funded by GOK funds. So we need to explore that. Finally, on procurement without budget, Mr. Speaker, this is again another problem. And the problem is not entirely that there is no budget. The budget is not there, but there is no money. The exchequer releases come late. Why? Because we are not able to collect. We don't have money. So we must just cut our clothes according to our sizes. That is the starting point. The planning we must have, and someone asked about the planning in one single portal. There is a disconnect between planning and budgeting. We need to have to synchronize, and this is the same ministry. We must ensure that we link planning to budgeting, to cash management, so that we don't commit ourselves into purchasing or contracting when we don't have the capacity to pay.
We have grossly overshot the time. There are some people watching from US who have sent these two questions. What is your view on the potential of blockchain technology within the financial sector, particularly in light of the blockchain technology report to 2020? Would you support the adoption of this technology? The next one, in light of the increasing global uncertainties and economic volatility, gold reserves have become more crucial in safeguarding national wealth and ensuring economic stability. Elaborate on how you would propose leveraging gold reserves as a reliable store of value in the current and future economic landscape. Additionally, would you explain any strategic measures that can be considered to enhance the role of gold in Kenya's financial system? Take at maximum 2 minutes. These are Kenyans watching these proceedings from the US. Pardon?
The first one of the blockchain, Mr. Speaker, I must admit that I need to understand it better. And
that is an honest
yes,
answer. We understand.
We need to get what it is. If it is something
I
that
don't
can
also
help
know it.
the country,
I also don't know it.
The better. On leveraging on gold
we'll
reserves,
need somebody to teach us about it.
Do we have an ICT person around? But don't you worry, Mr. Speaker. Now that has improved.
There's a nexus between finance and ICT.
We will
CBK, maybe when you get, if you get approved, CBK should be able to sort you.
Yes. Okay.
That's why I was saying that don't you worry, I will get...
On the gold reserves, just say yes or no.
Yeah, gold reserves, that actually we need as a country to move towards even establishing sovereign wealth funds, and gold reserves can help us in that. Yeah. And those are areas, those are emerging areas that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, John MBADI, as a nominee, I have some few mundane questions for you. Have you ever been adversely mentioned in any integrity-related report or investigations?
No.
Do you hold any leadership position in any political party within Kenya?
No, at the moment.
You said you resigned.
Yes.
Can you tell us your net worth?
My net worth, Mr. Speaker, is 380 million. And Mr. Speaker, my net worth, the difference between, I saw some of my colleagues have done their calculation differently, but my understanding of net worth is it's assets less liabilities.
Liability, yes.
So if you take all the assets that I have, and I wish I had my file here.
I've seen your calculation.
Yeah, it's 308.
437.
Yeah, 437
57
assets.
million liabilities.
Yes.
You are 380.
Yeah, and the liabilities is mortgage within Parliamentary Service Commission.
SACCO loans.
SACCO loans, about 31, about 20 million or thereabout. And finally, there is the KCB Bank loan of about 12 million. Yeah.
We received 43. We received 34.
The only deferred income, Honorable, sorry, Honorable, the only deferred income I have is I have some I have two now, but the one for Parliament, I don't know. The pension, I don't know how much it will be, so I didn't.
It will be calculated.
But there's one which I have with ICA of about 6 million.
Your pensionable now will be calculated.
Yeah.
It will be just below 200.
Thank you.
Chair, I was mentioning that because of the challenges Kenyans have had with this matter, because like now his deferred income next year would constitute part of his net worth, or rather when it matures.
Yes.
And most likely, if he's approved or if he goes through another vetting, Kenyans will want to know
How did your wealth grow?
How did your wealth grow?
I will be able to explain that, Mr. Speaker.
So, nominee John MBADI, we received 34 memoranda against or about you, some saying it was right to be nominated, others not. And there are 3 particularly that just involve around, I think, parochial conflicts within your political setup, but you have answered all of them. So we will be, there's some things that clearly look parochial, how you quarrel with people in political meetings and so on. So we've also looked at your documents and cross-checked with what.
But the only time which was available was still yesterday.
Yes.
And according to my faith, from 6 p.m. or thereabout, already Sabato imeingia. So, but I treated this as kama, is it donkey ama ng'ombe imeanguka kwa shimo?
Yes.
With the members of parliament, members of the committee for giving me this opportunity to appear before you and present my case. I have done my best. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant, you can escort the nominee.